So you want to buy an FD RX-7. Well, in this video, we're going to help you become the most informed and prepared buyer to do that. Now we have awesome buyer's guides for the Acura NSX, Toyota Supra, GT4, and GTR. So we're happy to introduce the FD Mazda RX-7 buyer's guide. All right, let's get started. So the first thing you guys need to know is that the FD Mazda RX-7s, or any RX-7 in general that hasn't been swapped, is going to come with a rotary engine. And that should be your first concern and your first order of business, making sure that it is good to go. It is definitely more complicated and intricate than a regular engine. It's like you're throwing away everything you know and you're starting over with knowledge as far as oils, tune-ups, drivability, maintenance. It is a very different beast. So when you're looking for an RX-7, you're gonna have to approach it with that knowledge of knowing how it works mechanically and also the things that wear and tear and that are known to fail. So with the 13B, our twin turbo motor, it is very, very complicated. And the reason why is that it has what people call as a rat nest. And what it is, it's full of vacuums, solenoids, and things that operate the sequential turbo system and also operate the engine in general. Some of the things that it controls is the EGR systems and the crossover for the turbo. And some of those things could go bad. And if you don't know what to look for, and if you're not making sure that those systems are operating correctly, you're going to buy an RX-7 that's going to have issues with the second turbo, the first turbo, or no boost at all. So when you walk into an RX-7, you want to ask the owner and ask him, hey, is the transition of the turbo working? And essentially you're going to be transitioning around the 4,500 RPM range. You have a small dip at 8 PSI and back at 10 PSI. And if the owner is knowledgeable and he's transparent, he'll tell you, yes, your first turbo kicks in and then your second turbo kicks in. There's no issues. There's no issues with the crossover. I don't have any issues with any solenoids, and there's no issues with the vacuums or the rat nest. Now that's the very first thing that I want to tell you about the 13B. Now a lot of people will tell you compression test, and compression test. As a matter of fact, the manual has its own way how to do a compression test. Well-known rotary shops can do a compression test for you, and it is kind of the standard when you're looking for a Mazda RX-7. But the numbers, there's going to be some ambiguity of what numbers mean. Some people say 80 to 90s, you know, you need to start looking at the engine and make sure that nothing's going bad. 90 to like 110 is like amazing. But believe it or not, it all depends on the person who did the test, if the test was done correctly, if it was done by the manual, and there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration. But the most important thing is that your rotors have faces. So you want to have some consistent numbers across the range. So you don't want to have like a 110, a 75, and a 105. That 75 would be the one that you'd want to look at and be like, hey, there's something wrong with this. So having a compression test is good. If for some reason you walk up to a car and it looks immaculate, the engine looks immaculate, and you go drive it and it drives amazing, and the owner is like, you know, knowledgeable, and he says the car is good but hasn't received the compression test, I definitely wouldn't walk away from a car like that, because somebody else could walk up, buy it, and then, you know, you're out of a great car. So some owners will give you a compression test and some owners won't. People who are selling them, I call them owners, sellers. So you need to take that in consideration, that just because you don't have a compression test, you're going to take other things into consideration in case you really want that car. Now, going to talk about these rotary engines, I want to ease your mind, and because it eased my mind. Let's say you buy the most immaculate RX-7, and for some reason you do need to do some engine work. There is so many shops out there, and there's so many reputable companies that having a full engine rebuild might cost you about $3 to $4 grand, and then you've got a brand new rotary engine. And I know that sounds crazy, but at the end of the day, that should tell you that even if you buy an amazing car, you know, it's a clean title, interior is great, everything's great, but you need to do a rebuild. You could do a rebuild and it's still reasonable. You're not going to be out 20, 30 grand. And, you know, once you do a rebuild on these engines, then you can have a lot of knowledge and you could start learning a lot about them and start your ownership fresh if you need to do that. So just to let you know that the worst case scenario isn't really worst case in my opinion. Now, one of the things you need to understand, and you should watch my video about what oil you should use for the Mazda RX-7, is that in the owner's manual, it says you can't use synthetic oil. Also, in the owner's manual, it says that you have to use a 10W30. But a lot of owners use a 20W50. A lot of owners use rotary engine oil. A lot of owners use all types of different weights. But one of the most important things you should know is that the rotary engines are very intricate in the way that they utilize oil. They utilize it in the combustion process. And so they do use oil. And it's not one of those things where like, oh, they just burn oil and they're inefficient. No, it's part of their process. As a matter of fact, you can think about this engine as almost a two-stroke style where it needs oil and fuel to lubricate the faces and the walls of the rotors and the housing and all that. So it is really important that oil is utilized in that process, in the operation of the rotary combustion process. So making sure that the oil has been changed is crucial. So that's one of those things that you want to ask the owner, like what kind of oil he used or blah, blah, blah. And if he's very knowledgeable about the oil, that's going to be one of those good things that you know that the car has been taken care of. Now, there's a couple of things that kill rotary engines, and that's dirty oil, no oil, and heat. And let me tell you, heat is one of those big ones. One of my first RX-7s was an FC Turbo 2, and heat got me. And you really need to make sure that you understand how heat cycles work and how maintaining that heat and making sure that your car doesn't overheat is key. Now, there's a couple of issues with the actual rotary engines, and that's with the AST. It's kind of like this extra coolant device that removes air bubbles and blah, blah, blah. But long story short, they could crack, the cap can not seal well, and then you can start overheating. A lot of people say that the gauges are not always as accurate, and that you need to make sure that your coolant system is top notch. Some people say upgrade your radiator. Some people say to upgrade your AST. Some people say to run a 180 degrees temperature thermostat. But all these things are going to be very important for you to know as a buyer, because you could go up and see how that RX-7 motor has been taken care of, what the owner has done to address some of these common issues, and if they haven't, if they've kept up with that maintenance with the OEM parts to make sure that they haven't had any overheating issues. So let's talk about something that doesn't apply. Service records. Now, service records is one of those things that you're always asking about cars. Like, did you do all these? Let me tell you, when it comes to RX-7s, the seller or the owner is going to be like your personal service record, because taking care of these cars, like I said in the beginning, is very intricate. You're going to ask them what type of oil they use, what they did with their cooling system, if they added some additive to the fuel to add some extra lubrication to the combustion process, what type of modifications have they done, power mods or reliability mods. So really having a seller to talk to is going to be very important. Now, that being said, what does that tell you guys? Buying one from a random company might not be the best thing, because you're not going to get any of that information and you're going to have to start from scratch. I'm not going to say it's completely a real bad idea to go and buy one from a dealership or from an import company, but what I'm saying is you're going to be missing that crucial data about the history of the car. Now, as far as the rotary engine goes, that's all I have. There's a lot of little intricate things that you might run into. When I bought my RX-7, I got it with the code 11. The seller didn't tell me about it. It got here, went on my first drive, check engine light popped up. And let me tell you, changing out the air temperature sensor was a pain in the butt. So if you're driving and you get a check engine light, use our other video, how to read your engine check light, and find out what it is before you buy it. Because if it is something intricate like the code 11, you're gonna have to spend some money and some time to get it fixed. So you're probably you're gonna want to negotiate that with the seller if you find something wrong with the car, right? Logically. Now, as far as the rest of the car goes, believe it or not, it's a regular car. Make sure it has a good Carfax. Make sure it has a clean title. Make sure there hasn't been any accidents. Look for any rust issues. Also, these have the pinch weld seal, pinch weld seams running along, and if people jacked up the car incorrectly without using the proper adapter, they're going to be crushed. So look at that. Just make sure nobody's crushed those, because that would just be unfortunate. And also it'll tell you if somebody took the time to actually jack up the car correctly versus just doing it incorrectly. Small things like that are like detective work when you're buying a car. You can see if somebody paid attention to doing that right versus not, because if they didn't do that right there, then you know what I mean. So the rest of the thing is, when you go to the interior, one of the most common issues I've read about is inoperable gauge clusters. And if there's an issue, I think there's a shop that fixes them, but it is one of those common known issues. But the rest of the car is pretty self-explanatory. I have an aftermarket radio, so it's not one of those things like, you know, it's a big deal. Minus if you're buying a R1 or R2 or whatever you call those packages, where you have that Bose system in the back. And let me tell you, that is very valuable, very desired. And if it is an original R1, R2 or whatever, you want to make sure it has all those parts that it came with. So mine is a base model, but if you do buy one of those R1s, you're going to want to make sure that it does come with that Bose kit. It's just one of those things where people want that originality with the car. Now, my car has the R1, R2 front lip. I'm still learning on that. And then the strut bar and stuff like that. That's some stuff that you could put on the car. But the original awesome ones came with oil coolers and that wing and all that. But anyways, when it comes to the car, look underneath it. Make sure that you know, you don't have any major leaks, that you don't have any major rust or any major damage to the suspension components or anything like that. But the rest of the car is pretty self-explanatory. It's a very small car. I think they're like 2,800 pounds, which is not heavy at all. But the main thing is, just buy one that you know that it's going to be reliable, or you know the history of, and then you can enjoy it. Let me tell you, it is one of the funnest cars I've driven, and I am super excited that I finally got one. Well, thank you for watching our video. We appreciate it. Please press the like button. We invite you to subscribe so you can follow us along with our journey of what we do with the RX-7. And if you find your RX-7 and this video helped you out, we congratulate you, and we also thank you again for watching. You take care, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.